Hello everyone. I hope that you are all doing marvelously well. In today's video, I will be answering your frequently asked questions. About a week ago, I posted an Instagram story asking you to ask me questions, and I filmed the video 3 days ago, and unfortunately I cannot access the video. Don't know why. I tried for an hour this morning, and then I realized it takes me half an hour roughly to film a video, so I wasn't going to waste more time. The only thing is that it's not going to be as spontaneous now since I've already answered these questions. However, this morning I posted another story asking you for even more questions, so that is when the spontaneous answers will come in. Now, if there are any questions that I have missed, you are very welcome to go to my Instagram page. I have 2 little highlight bubbles with questions that you have asked me on Instagram. Otherwise, leave me a comment here down below and I'll get back to you. Let's get started. Okay, the first question I will answer is my most frequently asked question, unfortunately, and that is my relationship status, which is usually asked something like, single? Question mark, question mark, question mark, heart. No, I'm not. So I am in a civil partnership with Mathieu Bergeau, who is also a classical pianist, and we are planning on having the big white wedding this July. Fingers crossed. We will see what happens. Regardless, we're going to get married, but if we have COVID restrictions, we'll just have the big party another time. Moving on to some more interesting questions. Questa Camilo wants to know, what is your religion? I was born and raised Catholic. My father was Catholic, my mother was not, she was Christian, and I was baptized, went through First Communion, went to a Catholic middle school and high school for a year, and even went to Sunday school. Religion was a big part of my father's life, and when I was a child, it was the same for me. I was an ardent believer, and for a period of time, my parents thought that I would become a nun. Yes, I'm serious. But as I got older and I began to learn more about the Catholic Church, I came across things that I didn't like, that I couldn't find an answer to. And it was around this time that my classmates were getting their confirmation, they were getting confirmed, and I was the only one in my class who opted out of this, simply because there were things about the Catholic Church that I didn't agree with, and I didn't feel comfortable going ahead with something that I believed was sacred if I didn't fully support it. And today I would consider myself to be spiritual. I am getting married in a Catholic church. I think that's important to Matthew's family. I think that's important to my family, and I think that it's a beautiful tradition. However, I would consider myself to be spiritual rather than strictly Catholic. I hope that made sense. Matt wants to know, what is it like living in France? Thank you for your question, Matt. I love living in France. When Matthew and I started to date, I was living in London, and he would make the trip from Lyon to come see me. And after doing this for 6 months, we kind of reached a point where either he was moving to London or I was moving to France. And I went to France to meet his family, and I fell in love with the area and his family. They're truly wonderful people, and they welcomed me from the get-go. So for me, it was a really easy decision to make. I grew up in the countryside in Kansas. I grew up on a ranch. Now, I don't mean like a ranch with horses. It was a ranch house in the countryside, a lot of land. And this is where I live now, except for the fact that indeed we have 2 horses. And I find that this pace of life suits me more than living in London. I'm so happy that I had that experience of living in a major city for 3 years. I learned a lot. I got an excellent education. I was given many, many opportunities that I probably wouldn't have received if I had been living in a rural area. But, well, now I feel like I have the time and space to focus on my artistry and to be calmer doing so. I think that I was more anxious in a larger city. Not to mention, the food here is fantastic. Along with Italian food, French cuisine is my favorite. I love wine, cheese, bread, everything. Gavalas, pianist, asked me a few wonderful questions. Thank you, Lefteris. I hope I said that correctly. Excuse me if I did not. Your first question is, when did I start playing the piano? This is one of my frequently asked questions, and it's something I've addressed in my highlights bubble. I started playing the piano quite late, when I was 15 years old. It's a long story. To make it short, I had moved to Spain and I was finding it incredibly difficult to adjust. I spoke a little bit of Spanish. I spoke even less Catalan, and many of my classmates and teachers only use Catalan, which is very frustrating. I was bullied, I felt very alone, and that's when I discovered the piano. I lived across the street from a library, which had an old upright piano in a spare room. I found this piano, I gravitated towards it, and I started to play. I luckily found a wonderful and encouraging piano teacher who lived in the same town, and I began to receive lessons twice a week. And he was the one who introduced me to classical music. I remember listening to Lee playing Chopin's Nocturne Opus 9 No. 1, and that was a turning point for me. That was the point when I decided that I wanted to become a professional pianist. And at this time, I couldn't even play a scale. I didn't know what a scale was. But I heard this music and it changed my life, and I decided that I was going to make it happen. And I did. I know that there is this belief that in order to be successful in classical music, you have to start young. And in a way, my life would have been easier if I had started piano as a child. But if you are watching this and you're considering starting and you're a late starter like I was, please don't be discouraged. If it's meant to happen, if you are meant to do it, you will find a way. The favorite place I have been. This is going to sound paradoxical, as I mentioned how much I love to live in the countryside. However, I really enjoyed visiting Hong Kong, and I would really love to go back. I visited for the first time when I was 14, and when I returned to the States, I immediately found a Cantonese tutor in Kansas City and began to study Cantonese. And a year later, when I was applying to study abroad programs, I seriously contemplated moving to Hong Kong, but I decided that learning Cantonese was too difficult and moving to Spain would be more practical. Spanish is a little easier, to say the least, but I love the energy of Hong Kong. I even started to study Cantonese a little bit again during the confinement. So hopefully I will be able to visit and perform there again very soon. Please tell me how you play the nocturnes so extremely beautifully. Thank you. So do you. I'm looking forward to hearing more Chopin from you. I appreciate the compliment. I don't really know what to say. I think that we all have a special connection to certain composers. And for me, those composers simply happen to be Chopin and Schubert. Mathieu, for example, has a connection with Rachmaninoff, Martha Argerich, and Schumann. So I think this is a very natural thing. Corso Gianni wants to know, which piece did I play at my debut? I consider my debut performance to have been in Briosco, just outside of Milan, at Villa Medici Giulini. And I was playing on a gorgeous old Blüthner, which served to my advantage here because I remember that as it was a forte piano, it had an especially light touch. And on the program, I was playing Liszt's Valse Dobermann, and I was terrified. I was very nervous, and even called my piano teacher back in the States the morning of my performance, thinking, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. And he encouraged me. He said that I should just take it as a learning experience, see how I get on. And thankfully, it was a success, and I even got a standing ovation from Paul Badura-Skoda, who was in the audience. This remains one of my happiest memories. Romina wants to know, who are my top 3 favorite singers, with a heart. Thank you, Romina. Well, I'm assuming that you mean classical. Immediately, my mind goes to female singers. So for example, Arlene Auger, I adore her. Elizabeth Schwarzkopf, I feel like I have to mention. And maybe Amling. Yes. It's a very difficult question. I'll leave it at that. Jay Hinkins wants to know, what kind of piano do I have? I have a Steinway & Sons M, which I purchased in New York 5 years ago. Shipped it over to Europe, which was a crazy decision, but I don't regret it. And I had this piano restored completely last year. It's not an old piano, it's from the 90s, but there was a bit of a fiasco, which I will not get into. If you want to know, I might explain it in a different video, but I needed to have the piano fully restored. And Max Millet at Transmusic did an incredible job. I am so happy with my piano. I'm in love with the tone, with the touch. When we play on a Model D, the keys in the bass are slightly heavier and the keys in the treble are lighter. And he configured my piano to have the same weight and touch as a Steinway D, even though mine is a Steinway M and is much smaller. Which means that when I go to play on a Steinway D in performance, I don't need a lot of time to adjust, which is really cool. Pablo Roberto wants to know if I like any instrument other than the piano. Yes, of course I do. So the cello was my first instrument. I started when I was 4 years old and took lessons from the principal cellist of the Kansas City Symphony. And I adored the cello. I did my best to practice, but my fingers weren't strong enough really to hold down the strings. And eventually, after a few months, I was recommended to take a few years break, wait until I was a bit older, and then pick it up again, which, well, I never did. And there are probably many reasons for that. I did several other activities as a child, from gymnastics to swimming to horseback riding, tap dancing, jazz dancing, Irish dancing. The list goes on and on and on, and there's only so much that can fit into the life of a person. And then I began to play the flute in middle school. I was studying with a teacher who had a degree from Juilliard, but ultimately, why did I stop playing the flute? You know, now that I'm thinking about it, I might have stopped playing the flute because I discovered the piano when I was living in Spain. That being said, I have been toying around with the idea of purchasing another flute and getting back into it. And then I tell myself, oh, do I really want to spend that kind of money when I'm already so busy doing other things, if I'm not able to make practicing a priority? But who knows? I might get back into it. And another thing is I used to sing. Yes, really. When I was getting my bachelor's at the University of Arkansas, I was required to learn another instrument in addition to playing the piano. I mainly sung Lieder by Schubert and Mozart, threw in a couple of arias. I'm a true mezzo, although I had a decent range back in the day. Not so much anymore. It's something that you definitely lose if you do not practice. Juan Pablo wants to know, in life, what do I love the most? How can I choose one thing? I do my best to live a balanced life. That definitely wasn't always the case. I am the type of person who is always doing something, who is always working. And it wasn't until about a year ago that I finally began to slow down. So, in addition to the piano, and in addition to music, of course, I have to mention my loved ones, Rachmaninoff, naturally. I feel a great connection to nature. I will practice yoga outside. I will bring a book outside. I love good food, although I do not like cooking. I can cook decently if I have to, but thankfully Matthew does most of the cooking. Very convenient. And this is an unusual one for classical pianists. I really like tattoos. I have a big passion for tattoos, and I'm looking forward to adding to my collection. Of course, it's not what I love most in life, but I had to give it a special mention. Joe Matvey wants to know if I do virtual lessons. Yes, of course. And because of the pandemic, all of my students, except for one, are through Zoom. So if you are interested in meeting me over a lesson, do let me know. I always offer a free 30-minute consultation lesson just so we have the opportunity to get to know one another before you decide to commit to weekly lessons. So yeah, I'd be happy to hear from you. Tyree Daisy wants to know, what languages do I speak? Great question. So in my biography on Instagram, I have several languages mentioned, which is true, but I would like to say I am not fluent in anything other than English. I speak French, Spanish, and Italian at a very high level. I speak Turkish at an intermediate level, and German and Cantonese at a basic level. Daisy also wants to know my favorite foods or treats. I have a big sweet tooth, which is very convenient living in France. I love their desserts. I like Paris-Brest. I love Saint-Honoré, pain au chocolat. And sometimes for me, it's simple pleasures. For example, in the morning, I have a cup of coffee, espresso with almond milk. I have that with the pain au chocolat, and I'm happy. Would you please name some films, directors, genres, or eras that I like? Wow, that's a lot of questions in one. As far as films go, I'm very much into older films from anywhere from the 30s to the 50s. And before I met Matthew, actually, that's pretty much all I ever watched. And there were so many more modern day classics that I hadn't seen. And well, due to the pandemic and Matthew's recommendations, I've caught up on more recent films. So anything with Audrey Hepburn, I love, I adore. I have seen Gone with the Wind 4 times, and I get highly involved each time I watch it, even though I know what's going to happen. This is completely unrelated to what I mentioned, but Spirited Away by Miyazaki remains one of my favorite films. Daisy also wants to know, what are some books and authors I particularly like? Similar to my taste in movies, I adore the classics. Oscar Wilde is simply fantastic. I'm going to open up the books application on my iPad. I enjoyed reading Charlotte Bronte and Emily Bronte very much, because at the moment I am going through a book list that I found on Goodreads of all of the books that you need to read once in your lifetime, which is why I'm reading so many classics. In addition to that, I greatly enjoy Murakami's writing style. I've read at least a dozen of his books, and I've read Norwegian Wood 3 times. And I'm not the kind of person who rereads books, so that says a lot. Dawson asks if I have ever suffered a piano-related injury, as he thinks he may have carpal tunnel syndrome, and it's heartbreaking. Dawson, I'm really sorry. I can't imagine what you're going through. I'm very fortunate in a way because I've never had a piano-related injury. And I think that's because I stop immediately when I feel pain. I remember a few years ago, I was working on a heavy program. The kicker for me was the Wanderer Fantasy, especially the 4th movement. I remember by the time I was getting to the arpeggios and the tremolos in the right hand, I was done. There were a couple moments when I pushed myself too hard and I needed to take 2 or 3 days off. Thankfully, it never got to the point where it was a more permanent injury. I think I would be a lot more flexible in the arm and wrist, and that would facilitate the tremolos. But at the time, I simply didn't know how to do that. I didn't have that capacity yet. And that's why I began to feel so much tension and fatigue. I know that there are several kinds of techniques that have helped people. For example, Feldenkrais, the Alexander technique. I do yoga on an almost daily basis, and I think it's a fantastic practice. I'm not saying that it'll help your carpal tunnel, but it probably will help your overall health, and I believe that everything is ultimately connected. So take good care of yourself, and I hope you feel better soon. Fromage bleu. Do I like or dislike playing Liszt? Okay, if you've been following me for a while, you can see that I do not play much Liszt. Don't get me wrong, I don't have anything against Liszt, I just don't resonate strongly with him. This might change in the future, it might not. I find many of his works to just be superficial and virtuosic. Not everything, okay? But I feel, for example, that Chopin can pack in more authentic emotion than Liszt can. But that wasn't Liszt's aim, always, as a composer. I may revisit him more in the future. For now, though, I am perfectly content focusing on Chopin. Samael Vikern asked me 2 questions. What motivates me to keep fighting for my dreams? That's a great question. I feel like I needed to overcome many obstacles to get to where I am today, and I'm still growing, I'm still learning. 1, I am a very stubborn person. I am diligent, and if I want something, I am ready to fight for it. Perhaps too much, right? That's simply a personality trait that I have. And I love music so much, I simply can't imagine myself doing anything else. So despite the disappointments and admittedly a few heartbreaks that I've had with the piano, not with the piano, but with situations and competitions, other musicians, I persevered through it because to me, it is worth it. It is worth all of the difficult times. It is worth all of the sacrifices. You also want to know, is there a recommended age to learn to play the piano? No, absolutely not. If you're asking for your child, I would say make sure that your child has an interest in music. Make sure your child has an interest in playing the piano, because the worst thing you can do is to force your child to do something that they dislike. I believe that children can start as young as 5, depending on their character. Perhaps others would benefit from starting a bit later. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and again, I started at 15. I'm here, I ended up okay, so don't worry if you are a late starter. Pablo Roberto wants to know, what is the most difficult performance I have ever made on the piano? I have 2 answers to that question. The first one was a giant program which consisted of Bach's English Suite in G minor, Franck's Prelude, Chorale and Fugue, and Schubert's Wanderer Fantasy. This was for my senior recital for getting my bachelor's degree, and it was such a technically demanding program. The amount of endurance required was insane, and I definitely would not pair all of those pieces together in the future. I mean, just stick with the Wanderer Fantasy. That's enough. Don't throw in another big piece, really. Trust me. On a different note, I also have to mention performing the complete 2- and 3-part Inventions by Bach. Don't know how I managed to do that. And respect to all of the pianists playing Bach out there, including Miss Hewitt. Man, oh man, that was so exhausting mentally. So yes, I do consider Bach to be the hardest program I have played. Dr. Alan Tyson wants to know if I've ever worked up or performed Schoenberg's Opus 11, as you think I'd be great at it. Thank you so much. No, I haven't. The only piece by Schoenberg I have played are his Sechs kleine Klavierstücke, Opus 19. Funny story. I learned them when I was getting my bachelor's degree, and at the time, I really wanted to play Chopin. How surprising. And my teacher replied that too many female pianists play Chopin, so we made a deal. I would perform the Sechs kleine Klavierstücke in order to be able to learn and include a Chopin ballade in my following program, which subsequently he didn't allow me to do, but here I am making up for lost time. Anyway, thank you for the recommendation. I enjoy playing Schoenberg which sounds pretty funny. I don't think I would go as far as learning his piano concerto. Oh my God, that would be such a massive undertaking, but sure, why not? Maybe after my Chopin era, we will see. Next, Stephen wants to know, I watch you doing your pedal work and I wonder, why doesn't she break a heel? I do not wish that. Thank you, Stephen. I really don't wish that either. And thankfully, that has never happened. I have broken piano strings. Many other things have gone wrong. I even forgot to bring dress shoes once to a competition, and I only had winter boots. That was a bad situation. But no, I've had no, it's really difficult to break a heel. I've never broken a heel in my life, and I have run in high heels, so no risk there. Not a question, just that I love your tattoos. Thank you. They love you back. J-Ski Fun says, I adore your tattoos. Do you think you're going to do many others? Probably. Let's be serious. Already now, when I see these flowers here and the moth on my arm, I think, there's so much space here. What a shame. We have to do something. What am I going to do? I don't know. I'm torn between ideas. I'm sort of saving this arm in case I want to do a full sleeve in the future, which of course is a major commitment. But I do toy around with that idea. I'd also love to do something ornamental on my hands. And I think that there is still a stigma against hand tattoos, more so than tattoos on other parts of the body. But I'm a pianist, and I think that it would be really beautiful to see a decoration on my hands when I play. And I actually had my tattoo artist apply a stencil when I finished my back piece, just so I could get a feel for it and see what it looks like. So we will see. We will see where I go in terms of tattoos. Don't eat the wood. We will see what the future holds for me with tattoos. I do think that I'm going to stick with black work. Simply for the aesthetic. I started with black work and I'd like to have a cohesive look on my body. That being said, I do love the look of American traditional, but I ask myself, how can I make American traditional work with my current pieces? So I don't know yet. We'll see what happens. Mohsen Himati wants to know why I don't play with the Bösendorfer. Well, that's simple. I'm a young Steinway artist. Okay, I'm allowed to play any kind of piano that I want, and Steinway would never keep me from playing in a venue if I couldn't play on a Steinway piano. They're understanding of that. Well, one, I am a Steinway artist, so generally if there's a Steinway piano and it's in good condition, I'm expected to play that. And also, I do genuinely prefer Steinways to Bösendorfers. And of course, everybody is welcome to their own opinion. I feel that Steinway has more of a direct tone, and the Bösendorfer is somehow more mellow. It's darker. Maybe it's more intimate. I just feel like I can personally do more with the Steinway piano. And I'm very, very proud to represent the brand as a young Steinway artist. Okay, finally, that's all of the questions that I got today. Thank you so much to all of those who reached out to me through my stories or through my DMs. I love to hear from you guys. I love getting to know you. If there's anything else you want to know about me, don't hesitate to leave me a comment or simply reach out to me on social media. Have an excellent day, and I'll see you next time.